Hey guys, how's it going? My name's Jeremy and this is Pt.1 Woodworking, and today's project, I should say, not video, is a little different. I'm going to be doing a farmhouse style table. I have not done one of these before, so going to be a learning curve. Should be a lot of fun. I love learning stuff. Hopefully it will help you guys with any questions you might have as I do this process. But what I want to do on this project is something a little different with these videos. Instead of making one long format video, I'm going to break this up into probably 3 different sections of building the bases, doing the distressed painted finish on the bases, and then building the top and assembling the top. That's today's video, is building the bases. This is some 4x4 non-treated from Home Depot, and this is what we're going to build the bases out of. It's going to be an X-frame style base that is a pretty popular style, and it's going to use free-floating tenons for the joints, so there's lots of strength, and it should have no problem being a forever table. It will last someone their lifetime to pass down to their kids. I'm also going to show off something new that you probably haven't seen, which is this right here. This is the tenoning jig, free-floating tenoning jig I designed myself. I'm going to talk about that a lot more when we go to use it. But it's designed to use this tenoning jig and a trim router to do your tenoning pocket. So no needing a really expensive Festool domino, or fighting with biscuits, or fighting with alignment issues that you can run into from using a dial jig setup. So that should work really great, but I'll talk more about that later. So first thing we've got to do is get these 4x4s all cut to length. So let's get at it. Here is pretty much the generalized layout of the main body of the frame. Let me move my tripod so I can get over here a little better. Okay. So as you can see, we have our center post here. Up here will be the tabletop. Down here, the legs or the feet on the floor. Now, I will say this might need some fine tuning to get these exactly right, because all of these need to be at the exact same height here. So might have to do a little bit of fine tuning on the miter cuts here on the sides and shorten them up just a little bit to get it perfectly aligned flat with this, but that's not a problem whatsoever. All right, now to get the rest of them cut, and then we'll move on to doing the free floating tenons. Gotta go fast. Gotta go fast. Gotta go fast, too fast, too fast, faster, faster. So now I've got all the pieces cut for the bases. Now what I'm doing here is getting my layout and marking my reference faces. This is probably the most important part of doing these free-floating tenons, in that if you go off the wrong reference face, or if you don't stay using the same reference face to create all of these, you'll have alignment issues. As you can see, I've got all of these marked on the reference face, so I know which ones of these line up where relative to this top face here. And from there, I'm going to measure the center of this piece here, the center of each of the legs of the X. And from there, once I get the center on each one of these, I will align them and actually create one cross mark. I want everything to line up and be a straight free-floating tenon inside here. So everything lines up here. This is laid out so that the top and bottom of both the X's and the center post all line up flush. That way when I put these boards here against the bottom and top, this will be the very bottom of the base that goes to the ground, and then up there will be the same board there that goes to mount underneath the table, and that's how it will be mounted to the tabletop. So with that being said, I've just got to find these centers, mark everything out, and then get to cutting the tenons. Here I'm just marking over where these go so that the correct faces line up and the correct lines, reference lines for each of the legs of the X line up properly. I also like to mark on the same side which leg goes where. That helps me just keep things a little more organized on which legs go where, and when I test fit these, I know I'm putting the proper leg to the proper tenon. Now I can start prepping these lines for how I need to lay out the tenoning jig. Now, like I said, I created the tenoning jig, so it's a little unique. The first thing we need to do is we need to know the center point, which is here. This is what we just marked. This will be the center point of our free-floating tenon that will be running right here. So now what we need to do is create the guidelines to align the tenoning jig properly so that it is centered on this line as well as in the proper placement vertically. So for the first thing I want to do is I want to create the center strike here. So to do this, I usually just come down a little bit, line up this perfectly. You can use a square here. I use the edge here because it's good and straight and it works well. The next thing is these boards, you can't guarantee they're perfectly square. So this to me is just as accurate. And they are 3.5 inches wide. So you're gonna mark it at 1.75 inches here. And go above the line. Same thing, referencing off the same face, and mark another mark at 1.75 inches there. From there, you're just going to strike a mark down those two to create your center line. Whoops. Now we have our center mark. To align the jig this way in the vertical axis on the post, we're going to mark a line at 1/2 inch up. So we line up 1/2 inch here, mark a small mark there, and then 1/2 inch on the other side, another small mark, and strike a line there. Now what this is doing is it's actually removing the idea that some of these faces of the board might not be perfectly square. So now you have a line that is perfectly 1/2 inch straight across, parallel to this center line, because these lines are going to line up with your free-floating tenons in the end of the X's. So here's our tenoning jig, and as you can see, there are, if I flip this over, there are two, get our spacers out of there. There are two legs here, are flat reference edges. So the way these work is these two edges can be loosened here with these screws and then moved in and out depending on the width of your material. Now what you'll do is there is a center line struck here. I will be selling the next version of these jigs. This is kind of a early model. I wanted to make sure everything was going to work properly. So the next ones will have a line actually scored into it permanently with the CNC. I marked this one to ensure that this was going to work properly. So the way this works is that line that we created earlier, the 1/2 inch above, lines up perfectly with this. This means that our bit will now be perfectly centered onto this line where we need our tenon placed. This strike mark here is now also lined up with the center strike mark that goes down the length of the board here. This gives us our left and right and our vertical. Another thing that's nice is since all of these posts are the same width, once this is set up, if you scratch all your marks or mark all your marks at one time, you can then move on and leave this set just like this, as it will perfectly center this line into the board every time. So that's a great quick way to do it. And after that, you simply just make your cut. marking the end pieces of the X here is really similar. As you can see, we have the mark here, and this is our reference face. So just like before, we'll use the speed square and mark everything from that. That will be our center point. And then just like before, we will mark the center point of the board and line everything up the exact same way. After I get this marked up, I'll show you the differences of how you have to do the jig. Here's the major difference in what has changed on the guides, or on the jig, I should say. I added these two guides to it. Now, what these do is add a extra set of guides to align your marks up the same way you would before. As I mentioned before, you have your center mark, as well as you will line up the top of the inside of your cutout here. And the way these work is, now that we're doing an end, you need to be able to adjust the width of the board as well as where it sits on the end of the board. This is the test fit, and as you can see, everything fits together really nice. It all lines up really well. I didn't show this one. This is the brace that will go up to the tabletop, but anyway, it was all done the exact same way. So as you can see, everything lines up really nicely. So now all I have to do is get some glue into it and get it clamped up. These are the base plates, or top and bottom of my bases. What I'm going to do is place these here and actually screw them down into the legs. This is what will go against the bottom of the table, and there'll be another one on the bottom that this sits on with some feet. Pretty much I just want to center the base left and right and the length of here, and I'm going to pretty much just simply screw them in and kind of countersink it a little bit with some decent lag screws, so this is good and tight to the base. And then I will drill some holes with some slots cut on each end when I go to mount this. That way when I do this and drill the holes, I know for a fact that the holes will line up perfectly when I mount this to the table. Alright guys, the bases are done. This was a lot of fun to build. It was a heck of a learning curve for me. I know this is a really popular style base for farmhouse tables and things like that. So this was interesting for me to build because I'd not done it before. I hope you found the video helpful. I hope this helps you out if you have any questions for it. If you want more details on how to build these bases, go to the website, check out the article. I'll leave a link in the description below. The next part of this series on how to build a farmhouse table is going to be doing this really beautiful distressed finish. Now, you can do this with any color, it doesn't matter, but we'll go into the details of all that in the next video. So make sure you hit that subscribe button and the notification bell here on YouTube so you can see that video come out. Make sure to subscribe to the Pt.1 newsletter so you can see anytime I post articles. And if you want to show your support, there's ways to there on the channel. Or just share these videos out. That helps me a ton. So, guys, I hope you found this helpful. I'm finna get back to work. I still have a ton of work left to do on these tables. So, yeah. Hope you guys have a great day. See you in the next one.